Hello, I'm Michael Hainsworth. This is Institute International Fellow and 2025 Nobel winner Peter Howitt.
It's sort of doubly important to find alternative trading partners. If we want an innovative economy, we have to make sure that entrepreneurs that spend money on R&D to come up with some new product or process have a market.
Peter is a professor emeritus of economics at Brown University. His work with the Institute goes back as far as 1986, and he joins us now. Peter, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Tell me about creative destruction of the Canadian economy. What's going on today in light of everything going on with our biggest trading partner and our attempts to extricate ourselves from their grip?
The biggest aspect of creative destruction, of course, that's going on at the moment has to do with artificial intelligence. It is not so much about what's going on in international trade. And, artificial intelligence is one of those general purpose technologies that comes around once in a lifetime or less, and has a huge potential for destroying jobs and destroying existing businesses. Anybody that's dependent upon the technologies that are being rendered obsolete by this new technology are in trouble. But it's opening up tremendous possibilities for improving productivity, and in the long run, for downstream innovations that will create new jobs and make jobs more productive and make them pay more. It can take a long time for those benefits to show up, but these general purpose technologies, generally speaking, work out for the common good, despite what they look like at first.
I mentioned that you've been doing work with the Institute since 1986. So tell me about that time through to today, outside of artificial intelligence. What example of creative destruction have you witnessed over the course of your career that would help us understand where we go from here?
Well, I'm not sure that would help us understand where we go from here, because each one is quite different. But of course, this will be the second general purpose technology that I've lived through. The introduction of personal computers into businesses everywhere and into people's daily lives was a tremendous change. That at first it was clear that it was going to make life difficult for all sorts of people, for typists, of course, for travel agents, many people. But at first, it took a long time for the productivity gains to show up. Robert Solow was famous for saying around that time that you can see the computer everywhere except in the productivity statistics. Because what happens with a general purpose technology is that it comes around, and at first people don't just throw the old technologies away and replace it with the new one. They tend to use them side by side because they're not fully confident with their ability to use the new one. So we looked at the computer and we thought, okay, well, that's going to save on photocopying, for example, because we can store things inside the computer virtually. We don't need paper copies, but we kept on making photocopies anyway, because that's how the workflow is organized. That's what we were used to. We weren't totally confident in the ability of the computer to store it and for us to be able to find it again. We started spending time, instead of producing goods and services, we spent time learning how to use the new technology. I remember when we used to have lunch at the faculty club and we'd be discussing the latest article in Econometrica. But then when the computer came around and we started typing our own papers, we stopped talking about what's going on in the profession, and we started talking about how to use WordPerfect, how do you cut and paste a paragraph or something like this. And here you have this skilled human capital discussing things that used to be what the typists would do. And of course, we still had our typists there too. We're going to see a lot of fumbling around, I think, with artificial intelligence. It's absolutely amazing what it can do already. And And there are signs that some of the big high-tech companies are already starting to lay off computer programmers and other what we used to think of as highly skilled workers because they think they can be replaced with artificial intelligence. So it's going probably faster than any general purpose technology we've seen in the past. History is a guide, but it isn't a foolproof guide. But I expect we're going to see, it's going to be a long time before we see the real productivity gains from this.
And I suppose that's where a lot of the conversation about AI turns to the prospect of a bubble. We tend to be very enthusiastic about any given new shiny object, and then we figure out ultimately what it's used for. I think my favorite analogy is Photoshop and how you can add additional functionality to that software program through plugins. And in the 90s, the new plugins were things like page curls. And suddenly every billboard on the Gardner Expressway had a fake page curl in the corner because we just had to use this new thing. We eventually figured out how to use Photoshop most effectively. So you've used AI as an example of creative destruction. And from what I understand, from what I've read of your work, creative destruction thrives on competition and openness. How do we reconcile the need for Canadian self-sufficiency with the benefits of being integrated with the Americans?
Well, I really don't think that self-sufficiency is a viable option. Canada is going to need trade with the rest of the world. And it's going to be difficult as long as Americans are imposing gigantic tariffs. So I think it's sort of doubly important to find alternative trading partners. If we want an innovative economy, we have to make sure that entrepreneurs that spend money on R&D to come up with some new product or process have a market in which to sell what they've discovered, a market that's big enough to make a profit, considering all of the costs that they've sunk into R&D. And you need international trade for that. You certainly need at least the whole country of Canada without a lot of interprovincial barriers. And that's going to be the case with all of the new innovations that are going to be associated with artificial intelligence. You know, you spoke about a bubble, and I do think that there is something like a bubble going on right now, but that doesn't really mean that there's no basis for all of the investments that are taking place in these companies. It's a shakeout period. You've got a lot of companies that really want to set the standard and be the leader, much like we did during the telecom boom. People called it the dot-com boom, but it was more a telecom boom, I think, than anything else. And it was it had a real basis also. It was a huge wave of innovation in telecoms back in the 90s. And there's a huge wave of innovation going on right now in AI. It's real. It's not just a complete bubble. But what's going to happen is that there are going to be winners and losers from this race. And the ones that lose, people who've invested in the ones that turn out to be losers, of course, are going to lose a lot of money on this. And the average in the stock market is no doubt going to come down at some point because you can't have all of these companies being valued at such high rates with such high price to earning ratios as they are now. They're based on prospective earnings, and only a few firms are going to have those prospective earnings realized. So yes, there's a bubble, but there's going to be an Amazon that emerges from that, just as it did from the dot-com bubble that turned out. I mean, people used to laugh back in the mid-90s how Amazon, which is just a bookseller, is worth more than General Motors. Nobody anticipating that General Motors was going to go bust without government help sometime in the near future. And something's going to emerge like that.
Stay ahead of Canada's latest policy moves with the CD Howe Institute's weekly newsletter. Sound economic insights, early event alerts, straight to your inbox. Subscribe free at cdhowe.org.
So if barriers to trade stifle innovation, can Canada realistically erect protective measures in areas like high tech without undermining long-term growth?
When other countries impose tariffs on you, it's tempting to fight back. And it looks like you're just giving in if you don't. But typically for a small open economy like Canada, there's nothing that you can do about it except try to find other trading partners. Imposing tariffs, well, it might hurt your trading partner to some extent, but it's going to hurt you too. And it's best to be looking elsewhere. I think you also have to remember that what's going on in the United States is not necessarily a new permanent regime. So I think we have to be prepared that for the possibility that things are going to go back to something more normal. We've got a few years to go before that happens.
Yeah, you're most certainly more optimistic than I am. I've been under the assumption that we need to assume that relationship is over and that it's never coming back. And even if it did come back, Canada would be better off building a economic foundation that is less reliant on the United States. And part of the growth is that innovation economy as well. If innovation fuels sustained economic growth, how should that framework shape Canada's strategy for strengthening the domestic economy, whether it be a high-tech AI company in Waterloo, Ontario, or an agricultural firm in the middle of Manitoba, rather than relying on cross-border inputs from the United States to make our widget or what have you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we should be definitely trying to strengthen the base of domestic innovation. For example, this is a good opportunity for Canadian universities to try to attract scholars from the United States who are very, on the whole, very unhappy with what's happening in the academic world, and many of whom would be happy to move to just a little bit north of the border and to a kind of country that's quite similar to what they're used to. And, many universities, certainly my own department of economics at Western developed back in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s largely on the basis of really good PhDs from the U.S. coming to Canada. And many of them ending up staying, taking out Canadian citizenship, and really thriving here. And I think that this is a golden opportunity to be recruiting in the United States. And I think we could really strengthen our universities, and we have to remember that most really profitable innovation is typically the result of tripartite contribution from government, business, and academia, and I think this is a really good opportunity to strengthen that one particular leg of the three-legged stool.
That feels like a long-term solution to Canada's innovation problem. Is there a short-term solution?
I can't think of one, honestly.
Well, they call you the dismal scientist for a reason, I'm sure. Then let's put an economic lens on this other major issue as it stands right now within Canada. What do you make of Canada buying F-35 jets from a country that's hostile to our sovereignty? The Danes want to sell us fighter jets that we would build here. From a standpoint of growth theory, should Canada prioritize domestic aerospace capacity, even if it reduces the economies of scale that would be associated with the U.S. supply chain and gets us a fighter that may be 20% less powerful than the American one?
Well, it depends on the particulars of the case. I mean, if there are other countries that are not hostile to us that can supply us with that equipment, then I think that that's certainly a viable option. If it looks
But
like,
would you prefer to have a high-powered jet from a hostile country or a less powerful jet where we're actually building them in Canada?
well, I think I would prefer it would depend on how much less powered, I suppose. Uh, Canada is, in military terms, it's a midget compared to the United States. I mean, we're not going uh, to be militarily safe from the United States if it gets really hostile, no matter what we do. And we have to do what we can as members of NATO to fulfill our obligations, which we really haven't done all that much in the past, I don't think. But we especially have to do that now that the United States seems to be an unwilling partner, even in NATO. And I really think that we should give no special priority to buying from the United States, even if you're optimistic about the long run future. We do need to broaden our basis of international trade, I'm sure, because even if things return to normal in 3 years, what's happened over the past year is just a wake-up call to us, I think, that you can't count on the United States always being friendly, but I think you can't count on it always being unfriendly either. It's an uncertain environment, and with an uncertain set of opportunities, you've got to diversify. And you don't necessarily have to build things yourself, but you have to have a diversified set of supply chain so that if one part goes wrong, you've got others to replace it.
If 75% of our exports currently go to the United States and we can't eliminate trade with the Americans, what's a realistic goal for weaning our economy off the U.S.? 70%, 60%, 40%?
I think it's going to have to be high because geography is so important in international trade. Fortunately, shipping costs have gone way down in the past few decades, and so geography matters less than it used to. So it's realistic to suppose that we could be less dependent on the United States than we were, say, 20, 30 years ago, without any significant cost to us. But how much? I really don't know. I think that strengthening our transportation system across the country so that it's easier to get goods to a port on either ocean is probably a good idea, because that helps us to diversify and would reduce the cost of replacing the United States with some country on the other side of one of the oceans.
Is globalism dead?
No, globalism is definitely not dead. If you look at what China is doing in the world, we just heard that they had $1.2 trillion of a surplus last year. That's a big global trade right in itself, just from China.
And our prime minister is in China trying to repair that relationship.
Yes, good for him.
Peter Howitt is an Institute International Fellow and 2025 Nobel winner, and has been a valued contributor to the Institute since 1986. Read his work at cdhowe.org. I'm Michael Hainsworth. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations on your Nobel. You've bitten it, right? It's not chocolate?
No.
Did you ever in your lifetime think that you would win a Nobel Prize?
Well, in my lifetime, I had moments when I thought it was a possibility. I had a lot of friends who told me that they thought that Philippe and I were contenders. But I heard that for many years, and it didn't happen. So, my subjective probabilities were going down and down all the time, and by the time it actually happened, I knew that the prize was going to be announced that Monday morning. And my phone, the night before, I was watching the Blue Jays beat the Yankees on TV. and my phone ran out of juice. I didn't even bother plugging the phone in when I went to bed because I knew that the call was coming, but it wasn't going to come for me. So that's, and I had no champagne in the fridge. So that's an indication that I didn't really expect it.
It's funny that you'd be watching the Blue Jays. You would think that if you had a fatalistic approach to whether or not you'd win, you'd be watching the Leafs.